Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Korach. And it, of course, features Korah, or Korach as we say in Hebrew, who starts a rebellion. Starts a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. And it starts as follows. I'm reading from chapter 16, verse 3, in the book of Numbers. And they assembled against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, You take too much upon you, for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Eternal is among them. Why then lift you up yourselves above the assembly of the Eternal? This is a whole group of people, and they include, as we see in the first verse, Korah, the son of Itzhar, the son of Kehat, the son of Levi. So he is actually a cousin of Moses and Aaron. Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, son of Reuben. What I'd like to focus on now is these two characters, Dathan and Abiram, or as we say in Hebrew, Dathan and Abiram. This is the first and only time in this actual story that these people are mentioned. We know nothing about them. They just show up here, but they clearly are among, or if not the biggest troublemakers of the group. We have here a group that includes Levites that are clearly resentful that Moses and Aaron from the same Levite family have a greater role, have taken upon themselves leadership, whereas they, from the exact same family, don't have that role. We then see that there's Dathan and Abiram. We are also mentioned On, the son of Pelet, the sons of Reuben, but we never see On, the son of Pelet, again afterwards. His name drops out of the story, and indeed, commentators believe, and it's actually a wonderful midrash that talks about his wife, who saw he was getting into trouble, and through all kinds of cunning ways, pulled him back into the house, and was able to prevent him from actually continuing with this rebellion, and he was saved. But what about Dathan and Abiram? We see later on that they become really quite horrible in the way they treat Moses and Aaron. At some point, we see this in verse 12, Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, We will not come up. Later on, when he's trying to work out exactly what the problems are and perhaps reach some kind of agreement, which of course fails, it is Dathan and Abiram who are the most galling in their attitude. They refuse to even come and speak to Moses and Aaron. And then they continue. Is it a small thing that he has brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey, which is of course very ironic because the land of milk and honey that they are referring to here is Egypt, to put us to death in the desert, and you would make yourself altogether a prince over us. In other words, they're accusing Moses and Aaron of terrible behavior, of insidious behavior, and at the same time being very resentful that they should have the gall to elect themselves, so to speak, as leaders. And of course, God has his say in this entire thing, and they are punished, the earth opens up, and they are swallowed up. Interesting, though, the Midrash attributes actions in previous chapters, actually in the book of Exodus, to these same two characters, Dathan and Abiram, to the extent that they become synonymous, these two characters become synonymous with the worst that can possibly be within the nation of Israel. And I'll give you the two most prominent examples. One is in the book of Exodus at the very beginning in chapter 2. We're reading about Moses, who has just become an adult, and he goes out to seek his brothers, and he sees two things. The first time he sees an Egyptian torturing a Jew, a Hebrew, and he steps in, kills the Egyptian, and protects the Jew. The next day he goes on, and this is in Exodus chapter 2, verse 13. And then he went out on the second day. Behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to the guilty one, Why are you smiting your fellow? And he said, this is therefore the person who's being criticized, the other fellow responds, and he said, "Who made you a personage, an officer, or a judge over us?" And at this point Moses realized, and then he refers the intent, "Do you intend to slay me as you have slain the Egyptian?" Of course, at that point Moses realizes that the fact that he had killed an Egyptian the day before is now become common knowledge, and he runs away to Midian. In this place, where we have these two people, the Bible does not tell us who they are. All we know is that they were two Hebrew men who are fighting with one another. The Midrash says that these two are Dathan and Abiram. And it's very interesting because here, as in the portion of Korach, we have Dathan and Abiram accusing Moses of being a boss, of taking upon himself leadership. It says, "Who made you a person, an officer, or a judge over us?" Now, clearly, this is incredibly out of line. Moses is, at the end of the day, just trying to break up a fight, trying to help in what would normally be considered such an everyday sort of thing. These two people not only resent Moses, who at this point they don't even know, they certainly don't know him personally, but they also make it very clear that they're troublemakers and that they have no real loyalty to their own people, because they make it very clear that they can hold this over Moses. They know that he has killed an Egyptian, and they make it very clear that this is something they can hold over him. The second place where the Midrash, our sages, attribute an action to Dathan and Abiram is later on, also in the book of Exodus, in verse 16, when the manna first appears. And we have the instruction that when the manna falls, each should take just the quantity that they need for themselves for the day, and they're not supposed to leave any over for the following day, which of course is a test for the people that they trust in God, that the following day there will indeed be a new batch. Chapter 16, verse 20, we read as follows: "Notwithstanding, they hearkened not to Moses, but some men left of it until the morning, and it bred worms, and it stank, and Moses was angry with them." Again, we're talking about some people. They're anonymous. We don't know who we are. And here too, the Midrash ascribes these two people to being, or these people to being Dathan and Abiram. What we have then is essentially our sages painting a picture of very troublesome people. People who are rebellious by their very nature. It wasn't a question of leaving Egypt and the particular circumstances of the desert and the recent trials and tribulations. This is happening after the disaster of the spies and the punishment, the knowledge that they will die in the desert. But that these people were troublemakers from the beginning. They were there from the beginning making trouble. But there's also an issue, not just a resentment of authority, but a sense that these are people who are constantly taking themselves out of the collective. They don't care about a sense of unity. They don't care about a sense of identity. If they can make trouble and split the nation, if they can make trouble and accuse Moses in a way, or not accuse him, but threaten Moses and turn him over to the Egyptians because he has killed an Egyptian, he is going beyond harming or threatening Moses. He is also threatening a very vulnerable position that the Hebrews have in Egypt vis-a-vis their Egyptian masters. And so these two people, as the Midrash has characterized them, have become prototypes of certain type of person, which unfortunately we have in every society. People who are born troublemakers, people who will rebel against any sort of authority just because the authority is there, not because they have a legitimate complaint, and people who will, at the end of the day, threaten the unity of a people, because at the end of the day they're looking out for their own interests more than anyone else. And I think that this is a message that's very powerful in the Midrash's view of who these two people are. By characterizing them and placing them in these different places, this creates a picture for us of a certain character of who these Dathan and Abiram are. And just as an aside, I don't know how many of you remember the film The Ten Commandments, which was the original film about the experience of the children of Israel in Egypt. we have the more recent Prince of Egypt, but this is the older one with Charlton Heston. Anyone my age certainly remembers it. And you may remember that in that film, Dathan and Abiram are there also in Egypt, not just afterwards. And they are also characterized in that film as the classic troublemakers. And if you were ever wondering what the source of that story was, this is the source. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.